My name's Tom Henfrey. I'm a sustainability researcher and educator currently based at the Schumacher Institute, an independent research organisation based in Bristol in southwest England. I work a lot with community-based initiatives, especially those involved in transition and permaculture, and over the last couple of years I've had quite a lot of involvement in ECOLISE, which stands for European Community-Led Initiatives for a Sustainable Europe, a new Europe-wide network of community-based sustainability projects, initiatives and networks. My main role is in supporting knowledge and learning, which when we first had conversations about the need for such a platform and what its priorities would be, was identified as one of the priority areas. And it's built on earlier work that I've done, which raises the question for myself and others who come from an academic background, and personally having found that a context which culturally clashes in many ways with my ethical and political aspirations around supporting and being part of grassroots movements for social and environmental change, and finding that cultural clash and the institutional limitations I was experiencing quite difficult to reconcile. So I and colleagues involved in this have really gone into this with the question, what happens to research when we make the types of values that motivate our social action in community groups the basis of it, rather than the dominant societal values that tend to structure research, the way it's conducted, the way it's funded, and very much tend to shape universities and the other dominant research institutions. So we've been doing that by liaising with members and really finding out what the practical initiatives in ECOLISE need and want in terms of knowledge and learning, and how the types of specialised skills that we can bring or we can tap into through our networks as researchers can support that, and how that can feed into research processes themselves in order to be transformative of them, so they're part of the transition to a sustainable society. I think the knowledge barrier has as I mentioned, quite a strong cultural cause in that, and I think that's a more widespread phenomenon. And the knowledge barrier itself, it's partly the need for community-based initiatives to be reflective and reflexive, to continually be learning from experience and sharing that learning, communicating with each other, and to communicate that more widely, so to at policy level, for example, to make effective cases for the types of support that's necessary, the types of institutional change, which is something that conventional research projects haven't been as good as they might have been on delivering because of the institutional constraints under which they operate. And I think those barriers are in general are more widely felt, and in terms of resources, when most of the resources that structure how people spend their time, not just financial resources, but access to materials, access to land, just the ability to spend time on and think about and actually do the type of work that's necessary to make social change. So many of the resources that exist are bound up in institutions and circumstances that aren't conducive to social change. They're very much part of the context that needs to change. So it's very well observed that a growth-based economy is probably in fundamental ways incompatible with sustainability. There's many arguments to the effect that very centralised, hierarchical, top-down politics are either fundamentally incompatible with sustainability or reflect a model of sustainability, a basically eco-fascist model, which isn't in any way desirable. So I think the biggest barrier is mobilising those resources and being able to take them out of commodified systems of ownership and control and exchange and move them into more democratic, inclusive, commons-based ways of organising, sharing, allocating access to resources and mobilising collective action. That's the most important step that needs to be taken to overcome that barrier. It's equally, in my view, a psychological and cultural barrier that generally as a society we're so invested in the models that we have, the existing models, and we leave so little space to imagine alternatives, to really think through ourselves what the possibilities are and to collectively come up with those dreams, which is a really vital part of making that happen. So this corporate control over subjectivities, over our collective imagination, is an equally potent barrier to change.
You could wave a magic wand and introduce one measure or change one thing that would help stimulate this necessary change. What would it be?
I think it would be to shift the basic cultural premise on which we're operating from one that's based on competition and an assumption of scarcity that competition itself creates and perpetuates, because once people start to compete that and hold on to resources, that makes them less available to everybody else and seem less available to us. So to shift from that towards a societal ethos that's based on sharing and therefore cooperation, and the assumption that there is enough for everybody if we're prepared to trust that what we need will be available, and to enact that trust by being sharing, being given, being generous in all respects, in the ways that we allocate resources and the ways that we collaborate to achieve shared goals.